Hello friends, now I am going to talk about French Revolution of 1789. Before talking about the French Revolution, we need to understand about the background of France prior to the revolution. The France was fed up with bad harvest. People could not buy a loaf of bread, and the non-reform minds of monarch also had created a kind of discontent against the monarch by the people. And during the reign of Louis XVI, Louis XVI was the ruler when this revolution of 1789 happened. He sponsored the American Revolution. In that, America, the 13 colonies of America had won independence from the British. But it was a kind of a burden on France treasury because France has sponsored it and it caused a huge debt in France treasury. To compensate it, uh, uh, the crown, that is Louis XVI, had requested for loan from bankers in France, but they were not ready to extend loan to the crown. So this created a financial crisis. So the reform ministers under the Louis XVI had advocated him to have some reforms so that the clergy and aristocrats till now who are exempted from taxes would also pay some sort of tax in order to revamp the financial crisis. But due to the effect of Parlement means it's a court of registered judge. That is, if the king orders royal decrees, it would be registered by this Parlement. It was not registered due to the influence of clergies and aristocrats. So, in order to appease them and increase the tax, ex-state general was summoned by Louis XVI. Ex-state general was a body consist of three classes. First is clergy, second is aristocrat, third is the ordinary people. So, on 5th May 1789, ex-state general was convened, and each ex-state, that is clergy, aristocrats, ordinary people, had each votes. As you all know that in National Estate General, Louis XVI had proposed like this, that the tax will be increased on the third estate, that is ordinary people, not on the first and second estate. So this was agreed by the vote of majority of 2 votes against 1. So these third estate people were aggrieved by this, because what happens is that they represented majority population in France, but their view didn't reflect in the ex-state general. So what happened is that they walked out of the ex-state general and convened a national assembly at nearby tennis court, and the representative present at there had sworn tennis court oath. So tennis court oath was like this: we will not disband until we have constructed a nation of individual citizens instead of a kingdom of servile subjects. That is, they wanted to establish a kingdom whose rulers are elected by the people. It can be a republic or it can be a constitutional monarchy according to this. Okay. Then on July 14, Bastille Fortress was seized by the ordinary people. So Bastille Fortress had full of weapons, and it symbolized the despotic power of the king by arbitrarily arresting the innocent people. In the countryside, same, During in the countryside during this time, a peasant took over chateaus. Chateaus means it is a kind of a manorial palaces of landlords, and these manorial palaces, chateaus, were converted into the peasant service centers. So what happens is that aristocrats were alarmed by the situation, and on August 4, they surrendered their landlords or feudal rights to the National Assembly, and National Assembly declared that the feudal society had come to an end in France, and they had adopted Charter of Rights of Men and Citizens, Charter of Right of Men and Citizens, which ensured freedom of speech, freedom of religion, trial by jury. So what happens is that this is a very fascinating and radical move, because prior to the revolution we can see that France was predominantly a Catholic state. That is, religion was Catholic religion. By ensuring freedom of religion, we have seen a radical move. Then, next important event occurred on March 5th, 1789. This was called Woman March. That is, some market women have marched to the uh, palace at Paris, to Versailles, Paris, in order to what? In order to bring king and queen and other royal members to Paris. Because what happens is that prior to revolution, these royal members were away from Paris, and they were at Versailles. At Versailles, these royal members did not know the agony of the common people. So what happens is that these people wanted to have a control on wanted to have control on monarchs. So they have changed the place, or they have brought the king to Paris. Okay, so while during this woman march, king and queen was transported safely, but some of the royal members, their genitals, their heads were being cut, and it was being fixed on a poke, okay, by the masses. So such kinds of barbaric acts was also being seen during this protest. Okay, now in 1790, civil constitution of clergy was passed. Civil constitution of clergy was adopted. So according to this civil constitution of clergy, the churches were constituted, and the clergies were elected by the parishioners. Parishioners means those believers who were in a particular church domain. Okay, so the kind of monopoly of clergies were being destroyed by this. Now, during 1791, there was a war with Austria and Prussia for France. Okay, Austria and Prussia waged war against France, because Austria and Prussia wanted to restore monarchy in France. As you know that the Queen Maria Antoinette was from the Austrian Empire, and many of the European monarchies were connected with the marriage ties. And if France, what happens is that if France overthrew monarchy, such kind of domino effect could be seen in Austria and Prussia. So they don't want to happen. So what happens is that they had waged war against France, but it was a failure. Now, during this time, what happens is that political parties were formed in the national assemblies. The people who were against the monarch and wanted to establish a republic was seated as left. They were called Republicans. And those who are seated at right had supported the constitutional monarchy. They were right. And in between these two, some people were there. So this is the scenario, or this is the contest, or this is the origin of the contemporary political thinking of left, right, and center. Okay, and one of the prominent leftist parties which had raised during this time was Jacobin Club. Jacobin Club. One of the famous leader of this Jacobin Club was uh, Robespierre. Robespierre. Okay. Now let us go into the picture of women's nature of that is status of women during these revolutions. So in 1791, Lady Olympe de Gorges, she was a daughter of Butcher. She published Declaration of Rights on Women. She published Declaration of Rights of Women, which explicitly stated that women were equal to men. Women were equal to men, and many women political clubs were formed, and they wanted to pursue a place in the army. Okay, so such kinds of lobbying was also done by the woman. Okay, so this is the status of women during that period. But in 1792, another important event took place. That is, people of Paris invaded the palace because the people was afraid that due to the presence of the royal monarchy, there could be a foreign invasion on France to aid the royals. So the monarchy place was being sieged by the people. Sorry, the palace where monarchy, where royal family lived was sieged by the people. And in 1792, Flanders has abolished monarchy and set up new elections for national conventions. And in 1793, the in 1793, Louis XVI, the last king of Bourbon dynasty, had died, has been guillotined. Okay. Now, apart from the Louis XVI, many others were also being guillotined during this time. So it was a kind of a bloody revolution, because many people were killed on suspicion of doubt whether they would commit treason against France. So what happens is that a committee of public safety was being formed. So during this period, who was the head of the government? Well, it is an interesting figure called Thomas Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre was the head of the government or head of the republic, and he was being notorious for something else called his reign was considered to be reign of terror, because during his time many people were guillotined, because for this purpose committee of public safety was being initiated, and under this 40,000 people were died, especially women. So for example, Lady Olympe de Gorges, then the uh, Queen Maria Antoinette were being killed, and this revolutionary government did not tolerate the women activities in politics, and they were hanged. Okay, at this circumstances, and many suspicious people were also being hanged, and there were many spies to it. Okay, and it was a kind of a reign of terror during Maximilien Robespierre, because 40,000 people were died, but many reforms were being initiated during this time period, because for example is that the stable diet, that is bread's prices were lowered during this time, and kind of a cultural unity was being bolstered by uh, the Jacobin clubs, by promoting French as a national language, French culture, um, red, white, blue, wearing red, white, blue shirts, etc. So such kind of cultural unifications was being adopted, and some sort of uh, austerity measures were being taken by the government, but it was a bloody phase and a reign of terror age. But it soon ended in 1795, when Maximilien Robespierre was itself guillotined, because people were fed up with this bloody revolution, and they needed to end this kinds of bloody revolution. And in 1795, a directory government was came into force, and this directory government wanted to spread the revolution to other parts of the Europe. And during this time, what happens is that there existed a strong anti-aristocratic sentiment in French army. So during this time, what happened is that many ordinary people had come into the positions of high officers. One such officer was Napoleon Bonaparte. So Napoleon Bonaparte, about Napoleon Bonaparte, we will discuss in the next session. So this is all about the French Revolution. Actually, French Revolution had a great impact for the world history, for other countries also, because one of the famous words of Metternich, one of the late Austrian empire, he said that when France sneezes, rest of Europe catches cold. So the idea of nation state first came with the French Revolution. The motto of liberty, equality, fraternity came with the French Revolution. It also taught us that a nation, a country, would be made by the citizens, and it should not be made by a king under whom there would be a subject. And it also given us an idea about that the king does not uh, derive his power from a divine source, but from the people itself. Or ruler, administrator does not derive his power from the divine source, but from the people itself. So many implications were there in the French Revolution, and impacts were seen in the French Revolution. Although the French Revolution, while we are coming into the negative side of French Revolution, it is a kind of a bloody revolution. Many people were killed ruthlessly, and in many cases, what happens is that the poverty has aggravated and become more poverty, and many tensions also has arisen among the people. So this is all about the French Revolution. I hope you have understood the topic. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.